Welcome to another Airbrush Asylum tutorial video. In this video series, I'm going to show you how I airbrushed the Joker artwork that you see behind me. This series is going to be split up into 5 different parts, so that way I can take you through each step of the process and how I airbrushed this particular artwork. So let's get a closer look at it right now and then jump straight into part 1 of this video series. Okay, so here you can see the Joker artwork, completed work. I'll just get out of the frame so you can have a better look. And it's airbrushed on synthetic paper. Now there's lots and lots of different texturing techniques used in this particular artwork. So that's why I've split the video up into so many parts, and also just to keep the parts at a reasonable length. So I hope you enjoy the video. Let's get straight into part 1 right now. So you'll notice that I'm beginning to make my paper templates so that I can start this particular artwork. So I have printed out the reference image to scale just on plain copy paper, and with my hobby knife I am cutting out the sections of the Joker makeup. So I'm deliberately following, obviously, the shape of the outside of the makeup to make those negative templates. I'm not just cutting around nice and smoothly, I'm sort of moving that blade left and right to get a bit of a bumpy, sort of uneven texture. This will also help to make the makeup, once airbrushed, look a lot more realistic. There will be a lot of texturing using a dowel and a razor pencil as well as a blade to really get that effect. Now I'm cutting out some of the darker areas within the eye section there so that I can spray my sepia and get my darker values. So take your time when you're making up all your paper templates. These are obviously extremely important. I'm not actually going to sketch on the surface of the paper at all. I'm going to create this artwork completely using the paper templates that I'm making here, as well as obviously rendering everything with the airbrush and then utilizing my texturing tools as well. And the paint that I'm going to be using for this project are the Createx illustration colors. They work extremely well on the Blair Synthetic paper. And I'll pop links in the description to all the products that I use within this video. Okay, so I'm going to organize the template now for the first color. We're going to work on the mouth section and the makeup surrounding that. You'll see I'm using some magnets to secure the template onto the Blair paper, and I'm starting off with dark red. So the dark red is made up of Createx illustration color Scarlet and Magenta. Also Createx illustration colors. I used equal parts, and then for my particular mix I added about 6 drops of red violet, so that was for about an amount of 50 ml once mixed. So that dark red now I'm using and flat toning the area of the mouth. You'll notice I'm doing numerous coats. And what I've got now is an eraser pencil, and I am starting to add that texturing, so the unevenness in the makeup. So you'll see here the pencil that I'm using is a Faber-Castell eraser pencil, It has a white end and a pink end. The white end is a harder eraser, so it's going to be a lot more aggressive. The pinker end is a softer one. So you just basically utilize whatever you want to use. It'll also depend on how long you've let the paint dry on the surface. If you don't have synthetic paper, you can get the Blair Synthetic paper either through us if you're located in Australia, or you can go to schoolofrealism.com and they can ship it to you. It's a fantastic product. The paint works extremely well on it. It gives you that window of being able to rework the paint, which is obviously important for doing these sort of artworks. And once it's cross-linked, then it's dry enough, as you can see, to mask back over the top. So I want to establish some shadows now, so I've switched to sepia brown. And at the moment I'm using my CMSB Micron. The CMSB runs a 0.18mm needle nozzle setup, and the airbrush that I used to apply the red was the CMC Plus Micron that runs a 0.23mm setup. Both airbrushes are from Iwata. So as you can see, lots of texturing. So while that paint is still wet enough to manipulate, I'm adding my texture, utilizing my reference as a guide so that I know where I'm going with it. But it is going to be a long process, hence why this tutorial series is split over 5 parts. There's loads of texturing, utilizing this eraser pencil as well as the dowel, even using a blade in some instances just to get those effects. And then what I'll do is I'll spray back over the top of certain areas as well. So if you've never used an eraser pencil before and done any of these sort of techniques, basically I'd recommend to definitely practice on something before you try to create an artwork using these methods. You can use the illustration colors on something like an aluminium composite panel. It's not going to work as effectively as the Blair paper, but it will definitely simulate it and get you used to sort of removing some of that paint and adding those textures and learning how to manipulate it and how long to wait versus, you know, whether to attack an area when it's really wet or let it dry for longer. That will all depend on what sort of effect you're going for. So I do hope that this video will help you. The other thing is, a lot of these methods were shown, well, to myself by legendary photorealism artist Dru Blair, so all credit to him. I mean, he is a master at this, and if you want to learn the correct way of doing it, you know, I just use this method in my artwork combined with some of my freehand techniques, but he really has perfected this. So I would urge you to do one of his classes. You can, as I mentioned before, he's the same person that supplies the paper, and he developed the Blair Synthetic paper. So jump on School of Realism and check out the calendar for his classes. He has a full-on school, and yeah, I mean, I don't need to say much about Dru. He's amazing, so go check it out, and you can definitely master all of this texturing and photorealism techniques. Okay, so you'll notice here that I have started to use the blade on some of the grooves on the lips. Whenever you use the blade, be very, very careful, obviously. This paper is extremely forgiving and tough, but you will still be able to cut through it. So, you know, when using the blade for any sort of texturing, make sure that you are very comfortable using it, and you kind of just slide it along to get the effect. So you'll figure out which way you can slide it, determined by your blade. So you know, it's just, you'll find that it'll only really perform in one direction. So play around with it, and when you're comfortable, then by all means use it on the artwork. It works extremely well if you want to render hair, so it's a great way to achieve those real fine highlights and those strands as well, especially when you layer back on top with a transparent tone. You will see a bit of this happening. Obviously I'm not doing real detailed hair in this one, it's more like an out of focus hair, but even with just layering transparent colors over the texturing that I've done, you will see lots of that happen within this tutorial series. Now, probably one of my favorite tools is this particular dowel. It just works extremely well. It's just a sharpened dowel, and it removes the paint a little bit more aggressively, but works really well for this particular artwork. So depending on what you are doing, you will find whether or not it is the right tool to use. So between this, the blade, and the eraser pencil, that's how I achieved all of the effects on this particular artwork. So adding a bit more sepia brown, and you'll notice that I'm starting to dust over some of the textures, and it's not going to eliminate them totally because the Createx illustration colors are heavily transparent, so they lend themselves really well to you know, to adding those textures and then gradually building up your tones on top of them. So switching back to the dark red, and I'm now dusting over a lot of the areas that I have textured. You'll notice that it's also tinting the sepia, which is perfectly fine, and you'll see that the red is going over those textured areas, but I can still see the texture underneath that coat. And then while it's still relatively wet, I'm going to scratch out some of these brighter highlights. You'll notice there's a little bit of a overspray edge from the red around that highlighted section to blend it back in, so it looks like a natural progression from texture coming off the chin area of the makeup there. So just taking a look, and pretty happy with that so far. So going to remove the negative template and start to work in some texture in those overspray areas. That will clean up the overspray and also give me a lead into the texturing on the face. So switching back to the sepia brown to add a few more darker values. So it's a bit of a process, as you can see. Texturing, then layering with your colour, then texturing, then layering with your colour. And just keep referring back to your reference so that you only paint what you see. You don't want to start to make things up that aren't there, so especially when you're trying to recreate something to look accurate as possible to your reference image. So now I'm going to work on the nose. You can see there's a bit of red overspray. That's going to get covered. I'm just masking up the top area, so I don't want any red overspray seeping under into the blue section of the makeup if possible. And same process, just starting off again with the red. I did go a lot heavier with the mouth area, so this time I decided to do a couple of lighter layers and then begin erasing when the paint was still relatively thin, and by doing that then just keep adding layers to that. I found that that definitely worked better than the way I was treating it on the mouth section. So if I was to redo the mouth, I would have done it in the same fashion as the nose that I'm doing at the moment. So keep that in mind. It has been a while since I've worked on synthetic paper using these methods, so I had to kind of relearn as I was going. But you can see how much easier that is. Even with the softer part of the pencil, I can actually remove and begin to texture, whereas before I couldn't. I didn't have that luxury. I really had to focus on using the white, harder section of that pencil. So you can also see how it's brighter on the actual major highlighted section, but I've still got some texturing, and you'll see now when I dust back over it how even though the texturing looks like it disappears towards the shadowed area of the nose section there, it still is evident. It's not totally disappearing. So that's the beauty of transparent colours. And now I'll continue to work in more highlights. So obviously if you scrape this off fairly quickly before the paint has a chance to begin its cross-linking process, then it's going to come off really quick and strip right back down to the white of the paper, which is great. Now if you want more of a gradual highlight, then you would let the paint sit for a longer period, and you can virtually use the pink part of the eraser pencil, and it will just remove sort of that layer that you've just laid down. It won't actually start to go right back into the white. So again, you can see here, going back over with the dark red. Again, using the dowel as it's more aggressive and really scratching out those real bright white highlights. Flicking the cutout back so that I can kind of see where some of the highlights should go. And you can see the magnets are nicely holding things into place. You can see how the pink part of the eraser isn't taking it back to the white of the paper. It's only taking off that layer that I just sprayed, and that's giving it a nice mid-tone of texture. So you can create some amazing effects using this combo, and just experimenting with different flash off times and utilizing the soft, the hard part of the pencil, the dowel, and the blade. If you found some methods for yourself, I would love to hear about them. Pop them in the comments below. I'm sure there's many other tools that you could utilize to create different effects. And if this is the first time watching one of my videos, welcome. For everyone else, welcome back. I would love to have you as part of our community. I do weekly videos, lots of tutorials like this, so if this is something that you find interesting, then by all means feel free to hit subscribe. Tap on that bell icon, that will notify you every time I put out new content, and give this a thumbs up if you do like it, and share it out so that we can help build this airbrushing community. So you can really notice how that sepia is starting to shape the nose there. And you can still see that texturing shining through, which is great. It's giving the whole nose a nice 3D effect. Now I'm going to clean up some of the overspray, as well as adding more texture in and underneath the nose. Again, that's the beauty of this paint on this paper. You can virtually just clean it up nicely, so even if you do get that underspray which creates that horrible overspray, we can get rid of it. Okay, so now it's time to add some dark blue. So we're going to do the makeup around the eyes. Now the dark blue is made up of cobalt blue and viridian, equal parts. And with all these colours I mix them with reducer because I like to run my paint a lot thinner. So I know a lot of people use them straight out of the bottle, but I just find that with reducer they perform so much better. So that's just a personal preference thing. So just play around with it, see what works for you. And after laying down the first tone of that dark blue, I begin again to add my texturing to really make that makeup look nice and realistic and uneven. So again, just jumping back and forth between utilizing the dowel and the eraser pencil and either end of the eraser pencil. So just following my reference as a guide and working in from there to create the textures that I need to in order to best resemble what I'm looking at. Now working back over it with the dark blue. So nice and easy, taking my time, just layer upon layer, and then now coming back in with the dowel to get some of those aggressive highlights in there nice and easily. Okay, so time to add some sepia brown back into the mix. This will dirty up the makeup a little bit. I will deepen the shadows later with detailing black, but at the moment the sepia is fine just to get a bit of the tonal values in there. You can see I've added a section that I cut out from the paper template just to get that sharper edge on some of the makeup. And back to the dark blue, dusting back over it. I'm not too concerned if I'm dusting over the sepia, that's totally fine. It'll actually help with the look of the artwork because it'll knock the sepia, that muddiness, back into the blue and make it all look cohesive. So you'll notice again I'm coming in with the blue, dusting back over my texturing. I'm not just spraying a flat tone over it, I'm taking into account the deeper sections and I'm coating them heavier, so therefore they will eliminate majority of the texture, whereas some of the lighter areas I won't dust over as much, and then I'll obviously re-highlight them if needed. Now working back with my sepia brown and starting to add a bit of stippling to accentuate the texture. You'll notice again eliminating any areas that need eliminating, but also not just coating over everything as a flat tone, so really deepening the shadow areas and some of that texturing within the eyebrow where the makeup has been applied extremely thick, so trying to sort of resemble that look. And then back with the dark blue, toning over it, which again is tinting that sepia back and making it all work together. So again, back and forth, much the same as what I was doing within the makeup area around the mouth and on the nose. So now that it's unmasked, I'm going to do the same sort of thing. You can see quite a bit of overspray even though I was running the magnets, but I'm going to clean that up now with the harder edge of the eraser pencil, which is also going to give us a bit of texturing, which is great. So coming in with the dowel there just to clean up some of those edges and start to provide that merge into the white of the makeup. And that's it for part 1 of this 5-part video series. So thanks for watching, stay tuned for the next one, and until next time, go grab your airbrush, do some amazing artwork yourself, and I'll see you again very, very soon in the next tutorial. Bye for now.